Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Happy Friday. My name is Kristen Palazzolo, and I am the Community Manager for the CA Security Community. Today marks the 5th webcast in this Summer Lunch and Learn series on CA Privileged Access Management. And today you'll be hearing from Steve McCuller and Jeff Parker. And today's topic is supplementing with fine-grained host controls. So I'm going to pass it over to Steve in just a minute to kick things off. We're going to hold questions until the end of this webcast. So if you have a question, you can either hold it to the end and ask it over the phone or in the Q&A or chat window, or you can ask it in the chat window or the Q&A panel during their presentation, and we'll make sure that we ask it to them over the phone at the end of the webcast. So first Steve's going to present, and then Jeff's going to do a quick demo. And like I said, if you have any questions, just feel free to ask in either one of those places. So we're recording today's webcast. It will be sent out via email to everyone who attends today in a follow-up email. It will also be posted to the CA Security Community, which you can find if you've never been there before by going to ca.com/talksecurity. All right, Steve, I'm going to pass it over to you now.
Thank you, Kristen, and hello again, everybody. So today's session is again, as Kristen mentioned, the 5th of 6. And today we're going to have a particular focus on one aspect of privileged access management, and that is the defense in depth approach by adding our host-based fine-grained access control to the privileged access management solution we've been covering for the last 4 weeks. Our subject matter expert today is Jeff Parker, so I'm just going to tee it up for him with a short presentation, pass it over for the demo, and then we'll open it up for Q&A at the end. What we've been covering so far is the use of privileged access management as a compensating control for breaking the kill chain, and then covering various aspects having to do with what makes a good privileged access management solution, such as its simplicity, the full-featured capabilities that you really need beyond just the credential vault, the extension of those credential management to applications, and today the defense in depth approach of supplementing the privileged access management, the broker-based, network-based, bastion host approach with a fine-grained access control capability on your mission-critical servers. So the business reasons for doing something about privileged access management are around primarily breach defense. Compliance has always been a big driver for privileged access management, and the auditors have driven some requirements to make many of our customers do something about controlling access to privileged accounts. But in such cases, the compliance checklist or the checkbox has always resulted in sort of a minimalist approach that doesn't actually reduce your risk. But over the last couple of years, the breaches that have been coming around have really brought a lot of attention to this space. Some of the ones that we've highlighted in the past are here on this screen again today. Again, at least 2 of the 4 breaches that you see on the screen have actually turned to CA for help with solving this problem. The privileged accounts are actually used by attackers on the kill chain. They rely on privilege escalation, abuse of privileged credentials in order to do damage. The attackers have various motives. It may be to steal PII that they can use to do a breach of individuals. It may be for credit card information. They can get financial gain by selling those numbers. Sometimes the motivation may be political, or sometimes just an axe to grind. Regardless of the motivation, though, the techniques are always the same, and they have a lot in common. And as you can see from the quote from Forrester, privileged accounts and privileged access is critical as a defense in depth measure to protect yourself from these cyber attacks. The privileged accounts are kind of ubiquitous, as depicted on this page. Again, the legitimate function of them is that they're used by system admins, network admins. Everything that you have in your environment has the concept of an administrative privilege that it has capabilities that regular users are prevented from using. But somebody has to keep these systems up and maintained, and that's why privileged accounts and privileged access are used. used by administrators. And it is the privileged access and the privileged accounts are everywhere because everything needs administration. So you have your on-prem applications. As you add virtualization, maybe software-defined networking, you start to have a different set of concerns. You've got a new surface area in this virtualization stack that you've got to secure. As you use the public cloud, that actually opens up another attack surface that you have to defend. As you open your enterprise up and start doing things like remote access for your employees, remote access for your partners, taking advantage of AWS technologies, maybe Microsoft Office 365 or other SaaS-based applications. You open the door for hackers to intrude, for them to plant malware and to patiently wait for maybe an administrator to log into an endpoint that they've been able to compromise, and from there they can do a land and expand strategy. So if the slide looks busy, it is. It's because privileged accounts are everywhere, and the challenge is to provide this security to control access to these privileged accounts while still allowing people to do their job. Again, the business outcomes that our customers are trying to get from privileged access management, compliance is always there. You always want to either solve, remediate an audit finding, or you want to make your next compliance exercise easier than the last one was. And so this is kind of a common denominator among all privileged access management activities that go on. But more and more, a lot of our customers are looking beyond the simple compliance checkbox to actually do risk reduction, to stop targeted attacks, and to mitigate real malicious insider threats. At the same time, they're trying to extend to the entire enterprise, which may include infrastructure as a service, might include SaaS. And being able to implement meaningful access management controls without impeding the ability of those administrators to do their job. So this operational efficiency means that you can still do your job even with meaningful privileged access measures in place. Strong authentication and the credential vault, that is the ability to hide the password for privileged accounts and provide a service that authorized users can get that credential. The zero trust, least privilege, role-based access control, the command filtering, session monitoring, recording, all of these are necessary and risk reduction components that can help our customers achieve these business goals. And as we covered last week, it's not just for people, but applications also make use of these high privileged accounts, and they are going to need to be controlled as well. One of the things we're going to be talking about today is complementing these controls that we've already covered with powerful host-based controls as well. So on the kill chain, this is by way of a review for some of you who have attended all the sessions, but it's a kind of an important baseline that regardless of the source, whether it's an insider threat or whether it's a threat actor, once they gain access, it's a necessary component for them to succeed is to escalate privilege. Once they have this privilege escalation, they can expand the access. And after they've done that, they'd be in a position to wreak havoc. The way that the attackers or the malicious insiders perform these breaches is a compromise perhaps of authentication or stolen credentials. Maybe they've stolen it from your apps or script as we described last week. SSH keys, very kind of a underground way of, and a very hard to control thing, but easy to compromise because it's a kind of an alternative to passwords that doesn't even require the user to enter any authentication. Using shared accounts, that is, you're communicating the password to high privileged accounts. Anybody who can get that password would have the same authority as a legitimate user. And then limits on lateral movement, that is, controlling what you can do once you get there is a very important part of controlling privileged access. Part of that is no limits on the commands, and then there's also this lack of monitoring and analysis. As I mentioned before, it's not always a lack of will for the monitoring, but oftentimes that the systems themselves are not giving you the data that you need in order to monitor this. Shared accounts are actually notoriously weak at providing audit trails as to who was the named user who was behind the privileged account. So our solution actually addresses those concerns. Strong authentication is enforced by CA-PAM. Where you can log in from, the application controls so that you can remove hard-coded passwords from your applications and scripts and thereby eliminate the risk that comes from somebody reading those passwords and being able to use them interactively. Access control based on a zero trust deny all. You can only access that which you've been explicitly authorized for based on your role. So this is kind of a role-based privileged access management solution. Automated sign-on so that you eliminate the risk of shoulder surfing or having to copy and paste the credentials at all. You can be automatically logged into the endpoint. Once you're there, command filtering provides a very powerful, easy to implement, agentless way of limiting what commands you can do when you're on, for example, an SSH session. And leapfrog prevention so that you can't go outbound from one server to another in an uncontrolled way. The videos that we record are going to make violation detection prevention apparent, so we not only enforce it, but you're able to view it in the video afterwards. That is a component of the monitoring and logging. You have the ability to issue warnings to users if they're violating policy. You can terminate their session. The videos, again, will contain all of that information. Everything that happens is going to be logged. That log can be forwarded to your SIEM. And very importantly, these privileged accounts will be tied back to the named user who authenticated to the PAM system in the first place. Those events can also be forwarded to your SIEM, and there you can use our Splunk app, for example, to get reports on all this privileged user activity. CA-PAM sets itself up as a host, as an appliance-based, very simple to deploy solution that works as a bastion host, so it sort of sits in the middle between the user's endpoints and the systems that you're controlling access to. Very highly scalable and delivers all these features in an easy-to-implement model. As you can see at the bottom, 3 different form factors are available. Hardware appliance, the virtual appliance can also be deployed as an AWS AMI. The features are essentially the same regardless. It's really a matter of personal preference or corporate direction as to which one you would want to go with. And on this purpose-built appliance, you have all the features that you would need for an effective privileged access management solution. The credential vault that can be used by users as well as by applications programmatically. The enforcement of authentication, your choice. How do you want to authenticate? You want to use CA Advanced Auth? Do you want to use RSA? Do you want to do a combination of LDAP and two-factor? Really, it's up to you what you want to do with authentication. We do recommend that strong authentication is used for Credential Vault because of the very nature of it. We'll support anything you want to do in that space, anything that you already have. Federated identity, so that's the ability to do this privileged single sign-on so that we know what you've got access to. We can provide that automated login experience based on the zero trust role-based access control model, the monitoring and enforcement of those command filters and the leapfrog prevention, the video session recording, and the end-to-end audit trail. This single architecture can provide all these capabilities in this purpose-built appliance. You stand them up as the appliances in a cluster, so you would have a pair for high availability. It includes the operating system, so there's no hidden cost, no operating system license, no terminal services, no database, no load balancers. Stands up a virtual IP. So everything that you would need is built into this purpose-built appliance. It contains not only the infrastructure, but all the features, and it addresses the entire hybrid enterprise, your traditional data center, the virtual or software-defined data center, public cloud like Amazon AWS, as well as your SaaS applications. We were already a leader in the privileged access or privileged identity management market even prior to our acquisition of Exedium last year. When we acquired Exedium, we did it as a result of a desire to really accelerate our roadmap. A lot of the features I covered on that last slide were things that we wanted to get to with our existing product. Turns out a lot of it is hard. That appliance is actually to have a purpose-built appliance that is so highly scalable, high performance with all those features built in is a very difficult thing to develop from scratch. Exedium already had that, and that accelerated our roadmap. So the product that we have today, Privileged Access Manager, is primarily based on the technology that we did get from the Exedium acquisition last year. It's hard to believe it's been 11 months, but that's how long it's been. And it complements our privileged access management solution that we already had through our host-based control. So the combination of CA PAM, or Privileged Access Manager, with the Privileged Access Manager server control, which is our agent-based, host-based, fine-grained access control solution, gives you the best of both worlds. They're not dependent on each other, but they are going to work together, and in sort of an 80-20 rule, so that Privileged Access Manager, the agentless approach by itself, can give you 100% of the controls that you need for probably 80% of the environment. And for a certain subset of your environment, like your most highly critical servers, you may wish to provide an additional control measure and a defense in depth method using our host-based access control. We're going to go a little bit deeper on that, but the capabilities that the Privileged Access Manager server control provides in conjunction with Privileged Access Manager is this in-depth protection for your critical servers and very highly granular access controls. Unlike other solutions, even super users are subject to these controls. So if you have a rogue root user who attacks somehow, maybe uses a zero-day vulnerability to take over a system that is protected by PAM server control, you can still defend the assets on that server even though the user may truly be running as root. And there's a lot of compensating controls you can put in place that would even prevent the breach from happening in the first place. So the user would not be able to access system resources like the files, folders, registry, killing processes, and so on. It does include a secured sudo. It's a replacement for your existing sudo if you wish to use it. Our sudo is actually more secure than public domain sudo is. It's also centrally managed. And it can enforce a trusted computing base by checking file integrities and so on. What's not mentioned here is also a Unix authentication bridge so that you can manage your Unix accounts through Active Directory credentials. So CA Privileged Access Manager server control is available on Unix, Linux, and Windows platforms. It applies a mainframe strength type of authorization mechanism to those platforms and provides that bulletproof type of protection for that subset of your servers to complement those controls that are applied by Privileged Access Manager. So again, why would you use the host-based controls? Well, for one thing, it supplements the Bastion host access controls that CA PAM provides. You may find that in a certain percentage of your servers, you like that additional protection, and that is where you can apply the host-based controls. It provides this improved depth of security control. So in a defense in depth strategy, you always want to try to block the attacker. On those mission critical servers, this gives you that additional control that is much stronger than what the operating system provides and will apply even to super users, just like it is for regular users. It is also, if you're concerned about somebody perhaps bypassing your privileged access management solution somehow and going directly at that server, such as through a firewall hole or through a zero-day vulnerability on the server. In that case, a host-based solution would be required. So our product defends against attacks that are directed at the servers, and because it works completely transparently, there's really little or no change in administrators' behavior on those systems. They don't even know it's there. Of course, if you're replacing sudo, that'd be a little operational change there to see the new way that sudo runs, but it's a very minor thing. And except for that, there's really no change in administrative behavior when our product's in place. So at this point, I'm going to relinquish the floor to Jeff Parker. He's going to walk us through Privileged Access Manager again, and then segue over to Privileged Access Manager server control to talk a little bit more in depth than we have in this session so far about the complementary controls that fine-grained host-based access control through PAM server control gives you. Kristen, I'm going to pass it over. I see he's already got the screen up. Thank you. There you go, Jeff.
All right, welcome everyone today. I'm going to be showing you the tool Privileged Access Manager and the Privileged Access Manager server control. So first off, right now, Privileged Access Manager can be accessed through any web browser, but we also have a new feature, which is the Privileged Access Manager client. This could be very useful, a lot of customer demand for it, any number of reasons. One, lockdown browser environments. would be just one basic reason for it. And also, browsers change very rapidly. So some clients just wanted a different way of accessing. So I'm going to go ahead and log into PAM. So, and once again, this would be the exact same interface that we'd be getting through the web browser. So as you see when we log into PAM, as an administrator, which I'm a full systems admin on this machine, you get a lot of details as far as useful information for your administrative dashboard. One of the things I really like is it lets you know the last time that you actually logged in. It also lets you kind of see the kind of recent activity that you've got. Lets you see kind of your license usage, and then see how many devices and elements under management, and then gives you a quick view of kind of the last things and recent events that are going on. Stephen mentioned earlier that this is available in different form factors. The form factors that I'm going to be showing you today, like I'm going to be utilizing an Amazon cloud service for this, so the AMI containers. If you look at this, we've actually got a cluster of 3 hosts, 3 of these appliances. They are in Amazon Web Services Cloud, and they are on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast. So it's actually kind of a real-world scenario of looking at what's going on. So like you say, we've got this. It's just your general administrative dashboard or landing page. As a regular user, and you'll see this through different elements in our demonstration, a regular user would usually lands on the access page. This gives them access to all of the different devices that they've got access to. So you can see different RDP sessions to Windows hosts, different SSH sessions to different hosts. We've got some web apps that this person has access to. Native tools for accessing things. So you can use like native PuTTY, native secure CRT. So you don't have to use the actual embedded tools. I'm going to be using the embedded tool, but it's going to be, you've got a lot of different options. So you can also use the native RDP client. Once again, this is a purpose-built appliance. Your choice of form factors, almost exactly the same functionality out of all of them. It's full-featured. You get your session recording. If we go back to the actual management side of it, if we go back to the management side of management portal, you notice that all of these things, these aren't different servers or different hosts I'm going into. And even the clustering end of it, that's all out of the box. That's all out of the box, and no additional modules, no additional resources are needed. The clustering is built into the appliances. One final thing I'd like to show on the administrative end of things is the policies. The policies, this is where you grant access to users or groups and allow them access to different resources. So this demonstration, I'm going to be using the sysuser and DBA for most of my use cases. We can see where I've granted the DBA user access to Unix 1. I've allowed them the access over SSH, port 22 traffic, and I've granted access to the admin 1 account. I've also allowed them to use PuTTY to access this. If I were to grant them access to the password alone, that would allow them to actually view the password. I didn't want to do that in this instance. This is as easy as it is to add command filtering, so blacklisting, whitelisting, and socket filters. This is your leapfrog prevention. Session recording, 2 checkboxes for a command line interface, and then transparent login. I'll show you an example of this, but what we're going to be using this for is for things like entering the password, the user password, when we issue an se sudo command. That over the wire, we're going to actually intercept that request, and the end user is not going to need to know that to be able to use the native sudo resource. And of course, I'll show you PAM server controls, secure sudo replacement. So I'm going to log off as the admin, and I'm going to log back in as a regular user. This user is going to be our DBA user. So in this demo, it's going to be a very short demo. This is going to be all out-of-the-box PAM functionality, nothing for PAM server control. And I'll let you know when we're starting to see PAM server control specific use cases. The first thing I want to do is just show you a basic, the basic functionality. So I want to take an SSH connection and create it. If you notice, it says warning you're being monitored, but I've got session recording, like I showed you in the previous example, of everything that's being done in this session. So this is an Amazon Linux workstation, once again in the Amazon cloud. So I'm going to do a couple things. So the first thing I want to show you is kind of how the whitelisting or blacklisting works. This is going to be a preventative measure, and this is done completely agentless in CA-PAM, but this is done over the wire, so to speak. So I'm going to try to shut down syslog. This is something that you would not want a user to do. So if we look at this, it says I've got one violation. You can set a threshold on the violations that this, right now could be sending an alert. This also, if we reach a certain threshold, like 3 violations of this policy, we could actually end the actual user's access to this session. We wouldn't lock out the DBA account on this or the admin1 account on this host. We would lock out my access to that account. So that just shows you that we've got that capability. Once again, completely agentless. One of the other things that you would want to do is when you get these credentials and you have them vaulted is to keep people from using that credential to hop beyond the control of your privileged access management solution. So if I was, an enterprising young lad and I wanted to try to bypass the controls of this, I would look at my IP address and think that the systems administrator probably used the next IP address available for another Unix host similar. So I'm going to do SSH, and I'm going to do 10.152.1.22. And this should be my neighbor if I'm thinking correctly. If we look at this, that actual action was killed. And then I'm getting an actual OS message that access was denied. Your session is terminated, your account or account deactivated. Should access violations continue? Please contact the administrators if you have any questions. So this is our leapfrog prevention. There's a very thin agent that allows us to do this. Think of it kind of like a socket filter or a small firewall type of thing. But essentially, you can tie a policy to a user to prevent them from making an outbound request. So, and finally, I wanted to show you the transparent login. This is something that's done agentless as well. But if I wanted to do sudo, like for instance, sudo su, if that was something that I was allowed to do or not prevented from doing, there's a little bit of a hesitation there because the operating system is coming back asking for a password, and the password is being given, and then it's being authenticated. And this is a micro AWS system, so it's not a very high-performance machine. But you can see that as a user utilizing PAM, even though the user that I logged in, their credential was needed a second time, we've been able to account for that and to give the credential. And I don't even have to know that that actual transaction had taken place. I've never seen the password. I never have to have access to the password. And that is just kind of some basic use cases for CA-PAM. And that's, like I say, standalone PAM. Nothing that we have done so far has been with the PAM server control product. So now I'm going to exit out of this section, and I'm going to go into some of the controls for PAM server control. So I'm already logged in as DBA to this host, to the PAM session, and I've got access to another system, my Red Hat 7.2 Enterprise server. This system actually has the PAM server control agent on it. Notice I am using PAM to connect to it. Notice I'm still being monitored because session recording is still happening, but there are going to be some additional controls in place beyond what PAM offers, being the transparent login, the whitelisting, and this terminal hopping. So the first thing I want to do as a DBA is do something that a DBA shouldn't be doing on a host. But before I do that, I need to switch to root. So another thing that we give you with the PAM server control is a replacement for SU. You can still use regular SU. SU will still work, but this gives you some additional controls. This allows you to centrally manage who can who can switch to privileged users, who can switch to other users, who can switch to any user on a system. This allows you to protect the utility. The SU utility in itself has a lot of a lot of value to somebody if they could compromise it. And this allows you to have a secure replacement that's securely managed. So I'm going to SESU so I can change the root. In this case, I'm not prompting for a password, so because I know that this is going to be used through a password fault in this use case. So the first thing I want to do is try to go over and edit the host file. So, sorry. I'm able to open, I'm able to read the host file. That's something that every user needs to be able to do, is to read the host file. But if I go ahead and try to make changes to the file, and I try to write that change, even though VI at first doesn't see, doesn't mark it that it's not a file that I can write to, I can't write to the file. If I try to force VI to write to it, that's when you do write with a little exclamation, which means really try, this is still something that's failed. I am, to the operating system, logged in as root. So I'm going to quit VI, and I'm going to show you kind of one of the basic tenets for server control is that the OS thinks that I am root because I switched to the root user. But if we look at who I really am, the server control product still knows and still tracking me as the DBA user. That's the user that I was logged in with. So whichever user I switch to, if I use the regular SU utility, if I use our embedded or available SESU utility, it's going to track me, and the ACLs through my use cases are going to all be applied to my actual real user ID or identity. So now I'm going to go through and do a task that as root and as a DBA I should be allowed to do. So I'm going to edit the Oracle configuration file. This is a fake Oracle configuration file. So I open up the file, I'm going to insert some more comment marks, and I'm going to write to this file. As root and as a DBA, I'm allowed to do this. This is an example of both limiting the super user and allowing super users to be, the super user access to be limited to an actual role and applying segregations of duties. So no more when somebody switches to root or on Windows switches to administrator. They don't have to have full reign of the entire operating system and all capabilities. You can do scope limitations of their access, even as a super user. So Steve had mentioned that we've got the ability to provide some protections and trusted computing functionality. One of the things that on the Unix side of the world is that we've got setuid and setgid programs. These allow a program to be run by one user and execute as another user. Some things in the Windows side of the world, that they have to run with an escalated privilege. You get a warning that comes up in user control. There's an equivalent on the Unix side of the world, but these are especially vulnerable applications. We've got the ability, and there's even a script to go and identify all the setuid, setgid programs, and to write the rules to protect them and to monitor them. These tools, when we talk about making sure and verifying the integrity of them, we actually check a couple different things to make sure that program is in the same state as it was when you left it. We check the CRC, we check the actual access time, we check the device that it's on, the group, the inode, the mode, the end time, the owner. We do a SHA-1 of it and make sure the size hasn't changed. So it's very, 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 very much, analyzing constantly to make sure that these still are trusted binaries. So, and we can do that with any binary. It doesn't have to be a setuid or setgid program. So one of the easiest ones to show is law. In a shared user environment that multiple people are going to be logged into the same user in the Unix box, this allows you to essentially communicate with other terminals. If you're going to reboot the machine or you're going to do something that could affect other people's work, this is how you would communicate with all other consoles. Because it broadcasts a message to every console, it has to run as root. So I'm going to say, hello everyone. And if there were other people logged into this machine, they would see that pop up. But it's a set UID program. So if I were to want to possibly infect this machine or take this machine over, that would be something that I might want to try to use as an entry point. So I'm going to find out where that's located. And it's located in the user bin wall. So I'm just going to do something as little as changing the date and time on this application. So I'm going to use a utility called touch user bin wall. So the program's not going to change at all, just the time and date information on it. So I've changed the time and date information on it. I'm going to run the same command that I did before, wall hello world or hello everyone, and misspell everyone. You can see immediately my access to run that or anyone else's access on this system, that wall utility is essentially not going to be allowed to execute on this host because it needs to be verified that it's not malicious, that it was an authorized change. So at this point, I am going to do another example of what we can do, and this is doing something a little bit more in depth than what we showed you with the whitelisting and blacklisting of things. So when we were doing the whitelisting and blacklisting, whitelisting is giving a list of the only things that you can do, and blacklisting is saying things specifically that you cannot do. But that entails you being able to anticipate every single way somebody can accomplish something that you don't want them to do. We take another approach to this with PAM server control. So we're looking at the rsyslogd process or syslog on the Unix host. PS minus rsyslog. So we can see that the syslog daemon is actually running on this host, and we can see that it's running with a process identification number, or PID, of 24691. So if I wanted to stop that, I could do service rsyslogd stop. If we look at this, it's not going to work. You can see that it's failing to do that. Then we can go in and we can specifically try to kill the process. 2.4. We can see that as root, I'm not allowed to kill it. If I want to do kill -9, which is kill, but I really mean it, there is no way that the root user is actually allowed to kill the process. So any attempt, anything that I do, any backend method, anything that we're doing, the actual process, our syslog, is being protected by PAM server control. And no matter what method I use, if I hide something in a script, the actual process isn't allowed to be killed. It doesn't care what method or what, attack avenue I have for the process. It's just a kill operation is not allowed to happen to that actual process. Excuse me. So I'm going to go ahead and log out as the database administrator. And I'm going to log out as Privileged Access Manager. Now I'm going to log in as a Systems Administrator. So as a database administrator, I'm going to log into the same host, my Red Hat Enterprise Linux host. And I'm going to run through the same use cases. I'm not going to explain everything that I'm doing exactly, but I want to show you what happens when a systems administrator logs into the same host and does the same action. So I'm going to attempt to edit the etc host file, which once again, host touch just updates the time and date information. As I need to switch to root first. So the host file as root, I should be able to do that because I am an actual systems administrator, and that's something that's in my job scope. So I am able to edit it because I can change the date and time. I would be able to change it and be able to edit that file. If I wanted to do the same thing, to see if I can edit, so if I've got read-write access to the opt Oracle init file, I can try that. So auth Oracle, let's see, init.org. As a systems administrator, I'm going to be denied access to the Oracle database. That's something that a DBA should be doing, not a systems administrator on this system. So the same host, the same users, same user, root, running the same commands. We have actually done segregations of duties, that there are things that the systems administrator is allowed to do, the DBA is allowed to do, but they're not able to cross into the jobs of those roles. If we had an administrator that was both, we'd be able to do a rule set to allow that too. So, and then once again, wall, because that binary was compromised, it is shut down for everybody, not just the person that did it. One more thing that Steve actually talked about, a replacement for the sudo utility. So su sudo is our sudo replacement. One of the things that we've got, let me get out of the root shell first. So one thing that it can do, the sudo utility, it can show you the different sudo tasks that you've got available to you or that you are provisioned for. So I've got the ability, not as root, to run and change the DNS server configuration as the root user. Of course, with this, we can do switches that you're allowed to do, switches that you're not allowed to do to the command or command arguments. So there is a lot of functionality that you can have beyond just doing, you can run this as root or another user. But I'm going to go ahead and do sesu sudo change DNS. And in this, we can see from the operating system level, I've got the ability to make the changes. I can make changes to this file as root through that. And once again, this is centrally managed in a more secure version of the sudo utility. So that is segregation of duties and some of the basic host controls available in PAM server control. Now I'm going to go through and show you some additional capabilities of PAM server control. I'm going to log back out, and I'm going to log back in as myself, GPAM. Sorry about that. I'm going to go over to my access page. So one of the things with a gateway-based or proxy-based solution that one of the weaknesses and things you want to try to avoid is people getting by the actual proxy or getting around the proxy, getting access to the console, getting behind the firewalls, getting behind the proxy, and getting direct access to the host. There are multiple controls beyond that, then nobody knowing the password to the solution, but being able to have granular controls to exactly what access you've got to a system is something that is a very valuable tool for this. So I'm going to log into SSH3, which is another Unix box in my Amazon data center. And at this host, I'm going to attempt to log in to my Red Hat Linux box that we were using in the previous demos, the Red Hat Unix box with PAM server control. I've actually created, as root, created a user called Rogue, and I know the password for that. And I'm in a host that's behind the firewall, it's behind the PAM appliance, and I'm going to attempt to gain access to this. And I've got no prohibited commands, no client software on this host. This host is not going to prevent me from doing anything that I want to. Of course, it's still recording everything that I'm doing. So the first thing that I want to do, I've got my rogue user, so I want to do SSH, rogue, and I'm going to put in the IP address for my Red Hat box. So if you look, I've actually made the network connection. Nothing has blocked me. I know my password. And it didn't give me a bad password. It didn't give me any kind of inclination. SSH just shut down, just cut off. That is because I have actually got a rule set on the Red Hat box that I only allow SSH connections from the 3 PAM appliances that I've got in the Amazon cloud. This, I can go further, and I can say I only allow these users or these groups from this host to log in. This is, a great, very granular type of control. And because you see that it allowed me to make the connection, but then killed it based on my user ID, this also allows you to have granular enough controls to where if you had a process, like a batch process, a scheduling process, something that needed to run, so an SSH command without going through PAM needed to happen, you've got the granular and identity-based firewall type controls. A firewall is generally all or none, or you can say from one host you'd allow it, but this would say that this connection is allowed only by this username. So it gives you a very, very granular control and allows you to really shore up kind of the back end when you get beyond a PAM or proxy solution. So now, when I wanted to show that, Steve actually recommended that we go a little bit further on this and show you something. So let's say that there was complete misconfiguration, that somehow somebody got actual root access to a host. They're not going to be going through the PAM solution at all. Let's say this is going to be my best way of showing you. Somebody got the root password and logged into the console. I don't have console access to the Amazon cloud that this is in. So essentially I went through and created a bunch of things that nobody would do in the cloud, but I've allowed direct SSH to this host and allowing it to do direct SSH as root. So I did show you that we generally apply roles by knowing who the user is, and then when they switch to root, we can still do the ACL. This is going to be the real root user on my Red Hat box with PAM server control running on it. I'm going to actually increase the font here because this is a little hard to read. So I hope that helps everyone out. So once again, who am I? I am root. To actual PAM server control, I am root. So this is real root, the same as being on a console effectively. So I want to go through and do a couple things. One of the things that I want to do is try to shut down our product, which is this PAM server control. This is the actual command to kill it. I am root on this box. I'm real root. I'm not somebody trying to run this root. Says you're not allowed to use -s. So as the real root user, I have not been granted the ability to shut down our PAM server control. If I want to go in and edit the etc host file, etc host file, that's going to fail. Real root doesn't have authorization to do it. If I want to edit the Oracle initialization file, that's going to fail. If I want to stop the syslog, that's going to actually fail. So, so there is, this shows you that even though as a real root user, I still have controls that will be in place. Root is just another user. Any super user is just another user, and then the controls can be put into place to prevent that. So this could actually be if a zero-day exploit happened and somebody actually compromised the machine, not a console access, the same type of preventative measures would still be applied. I think I ran a little bit long, so I apologize for that. But at this point, I think we're up for questions. I thank you guys very much for your time.
And Kristen, before we go into the questions, I just want to add to Jeff's presentation. Thank you, Jeff. That was really good. That the time restrictions for such a full-featured product as this didn't allow us to go completely comprehensive, and many of the controls that you just saw that were demonstrated on a Linux platform are also available on Windows, so that you would be able to protect files and folders on Windows, the Windows registry, Windows service termination, and so on. So there's actually even the sudo available on the Windows platform. So all of the features that you saw in this Unix Linux demonstration are also transferable to the Windows platform. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
At this time, we'll start collecting questions. So if you have a question, you can enter it in the chat window or the Q&A panel. I've also opened a poll to rate today's webcast, so please make sure you reply to that poll. We have a question that came in that was sent to me privately. Are the violations and alerts at the server control reflected at the PAM appliance?
At this stage, they're not. There's a couple of integrations we'd like to do. You would see those in your SIM, though. So at the syslog level, you'd be able to get that, and also as a consequence of doing it at the SIM level, the violations wouldn't be cumulative in the PAM command session. There are actually two different types of users, though, in that scenario. So the violation count really kind of applies to two different use cases.
If you'd like to ask a question over the phone, you can press #6 or *6 to unmute your line and just yell at me so I know that you did that. Another question. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Kristen. No.
Oh, another question came in. What kind of access control would the server control have on Windows environment?
Yeah, basically the same set of features. So you can control access to files and folders, starting and stopping Windows services, protecting the Windows registry, which doesn't exist on Unix, being able to defend it and have those policies effective even against a super user such as the administrator, or even the system context. And as I mentioned, the sudo capability is itself ported to the Windows platform, so you can do task delegation. So basically the same set of features that were demonstrated on Linux and Unix, also available on Windows.
Okay, great. Thank you. I don't see any other questions in the chat or Q&A panel at this time. Does anyone have a question over the phone? If you're not dialed in and you're listening to the web audio, you can press the phone with a question mark icon in the WebEx window and ask a question. Oh, we have another question that came in. How would the server control agents be pushed down to the servers?
So we support, the product supports installation of the server control product either in a couple of ways, but the most preferable one is through native packaging. So whatever native package your operating system provides, whether it's Windows or Linux, you can use that native packaging and couple that with software installation tools that you may have in place to deliver patches. It can be the same mechanism.
Yeah, there's package customization, so it can be a silent install package.
Mm-hmm.
Great. I don't see any other questions now. Does anyone else have any other questions that they'd like to push through? Oh, another question just came in. I should just stop talking and just let them come in. Would there be any default reports generated?
Yeah, so PAM server control includes two different reporting mechanisms. One is an event type reporting that who has done what as a result of these policies. Well, we controlled access to this server. We denied access to a file. We're auditing this. Those types of events would be reflected in reports that you can get from PAM itself through a component we call UARM, the reporting module. but probably more appropriately, you would send that, or perhaps in addition to that, you would send it to syslog perhaps and have that integrate with your SIEM and get reports that way. But there's also a policy-based or compliance type of report that says, what policies do I have in place and where are those policies applied? There are dozens of out-of-the-box reports that we provide for PAM server control. Those can be customized to your own needs. You can generate your own reports as well. We do supply a lot of them out of the box.
All right, so the poll just closed. Thanks for the positive feedback, everyone.
Yeah, so
another question. Can you review?
Yeah, this always comes up. So I saw two things. One was command blocking and the other was host-based control. What's the difference? Well, there are two different use cases here. One is where you have, through PAM, an agentless approach where you're delegating certain commands to maybe limited people. So you have a DBA, and the DBA shouldn't be allowed to kill anything. So you give that DBA through PAM agentlessly a blacklist of commands that says you can't run the kill command. That's effective and will work, and you can even block and lock that user out of the account if they run afoul of that. And it's a very powerful control that's easy to adopt and has this use case where it can be appropriate for somebody who shouldn't be able to, in a binary way, shouldn't be able to do this, that, or the other. Or in another way, a whitelist that says they really can't do anything, run any commands except the ones that I have prescribed. But in the case where we did the demonstration, it was the kill command that was blocked. Well, there are people who connect to that system who should be allowed to run the kill command. It's a legitimate system administration activity that you should be allowed to kill processes if you're a trusted system administrator. So you can't effectively write a blacklist against somebody who is who should be allowed to run the blacklisted command. In this case, what Jeff was demonstrating is that the syslog-D process itself was protected. And that's a control that you really can't predict through a command filter because the process ID will vary. You couldn't say that's process ID 1716 because it could be a different process ID. And you don't have to know the name of the process, but rather the number. In that case, the only effective control would be, I need to defend this process from being terminated, regardless of the PID. And that policy is applied at the host level. In that case, we were not blocking the kill command. The product was actually defending the process. It happened to be a kill, or actually it was a service command that also got run. So in this case, we were doing fine-grained protection of the resource itself, regardless of the command that was being run. This provides a more granularity and a greater depth of control, and that is why it uses an agent on that subset of servers that you're applying that fine-grained access control to. There's a question here about SQL commands. That actually could be done through the command broker. So that through the command broker, if you make a SQL connection through a SSH to a Unix server running a database and you want to block SQL commands, it's something you could filter there. File and directory access controls and PAM. Yeah, those are all handled, as Jeff demonstrated, through PAM server control.
If there's no any other questions at this time, we'll close this webcast. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Thank you, Steve and Jeff, for presenting. Like I said, I'll post the recording and the slides to the security community, and I'll send links in a follow-up email to everyone who attended this webcast today. I hope everyone has a great weekend, and we'll see you on the next webcast next Friday, same time, same place. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.